You can watch us every day. We are adding a new story every day at 8 a.m. Feel free to write a comment of a feedback. The debt was 14,000 crowns, and it had been 14,000 crowns for 3 years, which meant with interest it was something closer to 18,000, which meant Lord Aldrich Voss had been lying to everyone, including himself, about his intention to repay it. Davin Ashgrove knew all of this before he arrived at the Voss estate. He had known it for 2 years and had let it sit. Not from generosity. He was not particularly generous about money, but because the political situation had made collecting the debt inconvenient, and inconvenience was something he had generally found worth waiting out. Political situations changed. Debts did not. The political situation had changed in November. By February, Devon had run out of reasons to wait. He sent no advance letter. This was a choice. A man who knew a collector was coming had time to move assets, produce documentation, arrange friends in the right positions to complicate things. Davin arrived on a Tuesday afternoon with his solicitor and 2 retainers and the relevant paperwork, because arriving prepared was the difference between collecting a debt and beginning a second negotiation about when the debt might be collected, and he had no interest in the second option. The Voss estate was smaller than he remembered from his one prior visit, 8 years ago. Not physically smaller. The grounds were the same grounds, but diminished in the way that places became when the money stopped circulating through them. The gate needed paint. The drive had not been re-gravelled since autumn, and the ruts showed. The house itself was structurally sound, but the south wing's windows were dark in the way of rooms not heated, not used, quietly mothballed against the expense of maintaining them. 14,000 crowns, Davin thought, and that was just what Voss owed him. He knocked on the front door. The woman who answered it was not a servant. He knew this immediately, not from the dress, which was plain enough, but from the way she stood in the doorway and looked at him directly, without any of the particular deference that training put into household staff. She was perhaps 22, dark-haired, with the kind of face that was too composed to read quickly, and eyes that were doing a rapid assessment of him, with the frank attention of someone who had not been taught that frank attention was impolite. "Your Grace," she said. She had clearly identified him from the Ashgrove crest on the carriage, which meant she knew who he was and what he was likely there for, and she was standing in the doorway anyway. "My father is not at home." He studied her for a moment. "You're Voss's daughter." "Ellen Voss, not from—" "My lord." Appended, not the instinctive softening of a person in a difficult position, just the name, plainly. "My father is at the capital. He left 10 days ago." A pause that told him she understood exactly what she was saying. "He did not tell me he was expecting you." "He wasn't," Devon said. "That was intentional." She looked at him. He had the specific impression of someone doing arithmetic in real time, calculating what his unannounced presence meant, what his traveling party implied, what recourse she had and didn't have in the next few minutes. "Then I'm afraid you've had a long journey for nothing," she said. "Whatever business you have with my father will need to wait for his return." "When does he return?" A pause. "I'm not certain." The pause, and the words inside it, told him everything he needed to know about when Lord Aldrich Voss was returning to the estate he owed 18,000 crowns. Davin looked past her at the hallway, plainly furnished, an old rug that had been good once, a coat stand with 2 coats on it, no other visible staff. "Miss Voss," he said, "I have a solicitor and the relevant documentation, and I've traveled 3 days. I'm not leaving without a conversation. You may choose to have that conversation on the doorstep or inside, but I would suggest inside is more comfortable for both of us." She held the door for a moment. He could see her thinking, and found himself, unexpectedly, slightly curious about what she was going to decide. She stepped back and opened the door. The parlor she put him in was the one that had been maintained. Small, a fire, furniture that was old but cared for, a book open on the side table that she moved without self-consciousness when she cleared a space. She organized tea with the economy of someone used to doing things without help, which confirmed his impression about the household staff situation, and brought it herself and poured without ceremony. He liked this about her, he noticed, the absence of performance. His solicitor, Croft, sat in the corner with the papers and the expression of a man who had done this many times and was waiting for his moment. Davin took the tea and looked at the room and thought about what the room told him, which was, the money had gone elsewhere, Not here. This room had been maintained by someone who cared about maintaining it on very little. The book she'd moved was a property law text. The open page was about estate entailment. He looked at the book, looked at her. "You've been researching the estate's legal situation," he said. Her eyes followed his to the book and back, and she didn't apologize for it. "For 3 months," she said, "since I understood the extent of the debt situation. And what have you concluded?" She sat across from him with the tea she was not drinking. "That the estate is entailed to the male line, which is currently my father, and that his death or incapacity would not pass it to me directly, but would require my uncle's agreement, which my uncle has made clear he considers theoretical. That my father's debts are technically his own and not the estate's, but that in practice, a creditor with sufficient legal standing can make claims against estate assets if the personal assets are insufficient, which they appear to be." Davin looked at her. "That's a thorough analysis." "The book is thorough," she said. "I've also written to 2 solicitors, neither of whom replied." "Which 2?" She told him. He recognized them both. Both competent, both expensive, both the kind of firm that didn't reply to women without established accounts. "Unsurprising," he said. "They don't work pro bono." "I know," she said. "I wasn't asking for pro bono. I was asking for a consultation with payment deferred, which I was prepared to explain I could manage once the estate situation was clarified. Neither of them gave me the opportunity to explain." He set down his tea. "How long has your father been in this position?" "The 18,000, specifically?" She said the number without flinching, which told him she had known for a while. "I found out 3 months ago, the underlying situation, the smaller debts, the income that's been declining, the expenses that haven't declined correspondingly, I've been aware of for longer, 2 years, maybe 3. And your father?" "My father," she said, in the voice of someone choosing words very carefully, "has different thresholds for when something is urgent. What I find urgent and what he finds urgent are not the same thing." Davin looked at her. She was 22, and she had been managing the awareness of her family's financial collapse for 3 years, researching property law alone, being ignored by the solicitors who might have helped, and was now sitting across from the man her father owed 18,000 crowns to, discussing it with perfect clarity. "The estate assets," he said, setting aside the entailment question for a moment. "What's actually here?" She looked at him. "You mean, what can you take?" "I mean, what exists," he said. "I'm not here to strip a household. I'm here because a debt has been ignored for 3 years, and I intend to have a resolution. A resolution can look like several things." She considered this for a moment. Then she started talking, and what she said in the next 20 minutes was the clearest and most comprehensive account of an estate's financial situation that Devan had received from anyone, including the 3 professional assessors he had used over the years. She knew the livestock numbers and their current market value. She knew the tenant farm rents and which tenants were behind, and by how much. She knew the timber rights on the north section and what they would be worth if sold versus what they generated annually. She knew the house contents that had value: silver plate, certain furniture, 2 paintings, and she had already estimated their auction prices, which were conservative and probably accurate. She knew the outstanding accounts with local merchants, and which of them were patient and which were not. She knew all of this because she had spent 3 months finding it out, and she had written it all down, and when she finished telling him, she produced a document, handwritten, organized by category, with totals at the bottom, and put it on the table between them. Croft, from his corner, leaned forward to look at it. His expression changed. Devan picked it up and read it, turned to the second page, back to the first. The document was more useful than most professional assessments he had commissioned. The numbers were current. She had clearly gathered them within the last few weeks, and the organization made the situation visible without requiring interpretation. "You prepared this before I arrived," he said. "I prepared it 3 weeks ago," she said, "when I calculated that a collection was likely before spring. I assumed whoever you sent would want to know the real picture." A pause. "I didn't expect you to come yourself." "I usually do," Davin said. "It's faster." She looked at the document in his hands. "Then you can see that the assets, at realistic valuation, cover approximately 11,000 of the 18. The remaining 7 requires either a payment arrangement or a claim against the estate principal, which the entailment complicates. I can see that, he said. I can also see that your numbers on the North Timber rights are understated. She looked at him. I used last year's transaction record from the county office. The county office records are consistently behind the actual market by 6 to 8 months, he said. Current timber prices in the Northern Territories are running about 12% higher than last year's numbers. Your timber rights valuation should be closer to $4,200 than $3,700. She was quiet for a moment. That changes the coverage calculation. To about 12,000, he said, which is still not 18. No, she said. But it's different from 11. Croft made a note. Davin set the document down and looked at the woman across from him, who had done 3 months of estate assessment alone, and produced a document that a professional firm would have charged 200 crowns to compile and would not have made as useful. Where is your father specifically? He said. She looked at her hands. I believe he's at his club, she said. In the capital. He goes when things are difficult here. A pause. He went when things became difficult 3 years ago, and has been returning less frequently since. Devan thought about Aldrich Voss, whom he had met twice. A man of 60, pleasant, ineffectual, the kind of man who borrowed money with genuine intention and then found the intention harder to sustain than the borrowing, the kind of man who had a daughter who prepared estate assessments alone while he sat in his club. Miss Voss, he said, I'm going to ask you a direct question. She met his eyes. If I pursue this in the conventional manner, claim against estate assets, formal proceedings, what happens to you? She absorbed this. I have a small income from my mother's estate that's separate from the entailment, she said. About 200 a year. I could live on it, modestly, somewhere less expensive than this. She looked at the room, the maintained room, the old but cared-for furniture, the fire. The house would be sold. The estate would be liquidated in some form. My uncle would inherit whatever remained of the principal, since he's the next male heir, and that would be that. And you would be someone who lives on 200 a year, she said, plainly, without self-pity or drama. That's not the worst outcome. It's the likely one. He looked at her. She was, he thought, the most honest person he had met in this specific kind of meeting, and he had conducted a great many of them. He picked up his tea. Croft, he said, we'll need another hour. The arrangement he proposed was not the arrangement he had come to propose, because the arrangement he had come to propose no longer fit the situation, as he now understood it. What he had come to propose was conventional, a formal legal claim, asset liquidation where available, a structured arrangement for whatever remained, Voss held to account in writing. What he proposed instead was this: a stay on formal proceedings for 60 days, during which Croft would conduct an independent verification of the asset values Elan had compiled. A detailed accounting of the debt's composition would be reviewed for errors or adjustable elements, and a meeting would be arranged with Aldrich Voss, at which the full situation would be presented. The 60 days doesn't benefit you, Elan said, when he laid this out. You've waited 3 years. 60 more days is not in your interest. It benefits the accuracy of the resolution, he said. If Croft's verification aligns with your numbers, I have a clearer picture. If it doesn't, I need to know where the difference is, and why. He looked at her. Your document is thorough, but you've been working alone with limited access to certain records. Professional verification protects both of us. It protects me from what? From agreeing to terms based on an underestimation that surfaces later, he said. If your North Timber rights are worth more than we think, which they may be, I gave you a rough correction. That changes the available coverage and potentially changes what a fair arrangement looks like. She looked at him steadily. You're going to verify the numbers for the benefit of the debtor. I'm going to verify the numbers, he said, because I prefer accurate information to inaccurate information, and because a resolution I can stand behind is worth more than a fast resolution I have to revisit. She absorbed this. And my father, she said. The meeting. He needs to be in the room, Devan said. Whatever arrangement is made, it can't hold if the person it's made with isn't there. He can't keep avoiding this. He paused. Can you get him to a meeting? She was quiet for a moment. I can write to him, she said. He doesn't always respond to my letters. He responds better to. She stopped. To what? She looked at him. To the letters he can't ignore, she said. Which would be one from you, or from your solicitor, formally. Then Croft will write, he said. A formal notice of the 60-day stay and the scheduled meeting. That removes any ambiguity about what happens if he fails to appear. She nodded once, with the brisk efficiency of someone who had been waiting a long time for a situation to stop being theoretical, and had finally found something to do with the waiting. Croft produced the preliminary paperwork. They went through it item by item, and she asked questions about 3 specific clauses that she had correctly identified as points of potential ambiguity, and Croft's answers satisfied 2 of them and required an adjustment on the 3rd. Davin watched her read the adjusted clause, confirm it, and sign, and thought that she had handled this entire afternoon better than men twice her age and with professional support had handled similar situations in his experience. You should have had a solicitor, he said, when they were done. I know, she said. The 2 I wrote to disagreed. Write to Marin and Doss, he said, on New Aldgate Street. Tell them I recommended you. They'll take the consultation. She looked at him. Why? He picked up his coat. Because you've done 3 months of work that should have been done by a professional, and you've done it well, and you're going to need legal counsel for the meeting with your father, regardless of how the numbers settle. He looked at her. And because the solicitors I recommend take my recommendations seriously. It solves your access problem. She was very still for a moment, doing the internal accounting he had been watching her do all afternoon. That's a significant assistance, she said carefully. It's a name, he said. What you do with it is up to you. She stood. He stood. They were near the door of the parlor, and the afternoon had gone gray through the window, and the fire had burned lower while they worked. Your Grace, she said, I want to ask you something directly. He waited. When you came today, before I opened the door, before you knew who was here, what did you intend to do? He considered the honest answer versus the diplomatic one, and chose the honest one, because she had been honest with him for 3 hours. I intended to begin formal proceedings immediately, he said. A stay wasn't part of my plan. She absorbed this. What changed it? The document, he said. And the conversation. He paused. I've been in this kind of meeting many times. Most people in your position either try to negotiate from weakness, apologizing, minimizing, hoping I'll be lenient, or they deflect, provide incomplete information, delay. You did neither. You had a comprehensive picture of a bad situation, and you presented it clearly without making it a performance. I didn't see the benefit of a performance, she said. Most people can't separate their situation from their feelings about their situation, he said. You can. That's useful in the way of things that are genuinely rare. She looked at him for a moment, with the frank assessment she'd had in the doorway, except now it had an additional quality to it, something more considered. You're telling me what I did well, she said, as an explanation for your decision. Yes. Most people don't do that. No, he agreed. She opened the door of the parlor, and he walked through it, and Croft followed with his papers, and they walked through the entrance hall toward the front door, with its old but maintained rug, and its 2 coats on the stand. At the door, the meeting in 60 days, if my father doesn't come. Then the stay expires and I proceed formally, he said. That's what the paperwork says. I know what the paperwork says, she said. I read it. A pause. I'll make sure he comes. He believed her, which was not something he said because saying it would have been condescending, but it was true, and it informed the rest of what he was thinking as he walked to the carriage. The 60 days did what 60 days did, which was to produce the verification Croft conducted and the meeting Elan had promised. Croft's verification adjusted 3 of her numbers upward and 1 downward, producing a total that was slightly higher than her estimate. The timber rights had indeed been understated, and one of the tenant arrears she'd calculated conservatively turned out to be larger than the county record showed, which was a surprise and not a good one. The net coverage came to 12,400, which left 5,600 uncovered. The meeting with Aldrich Voss happened on day 58, which was later than Devan had expected, and earlier than he'd feared. Elan had apparently managed her father's attendance through means she didn't fully explain in the brief correspondence that had passed between them during the 60 days. Correspondence about the verification numbers, about the document adjustments, about one specific clause that she had sent back to Croft with a proposed revision that was better than the original, which Croft had silently implemented. Aldrich Voss was 61 and looked 68 and had the specific quality of a man who had been deferring things for so long that deferral had become his primary mode of engagement with the world. He greeted Devan with embarrassed warmth, which was the greeting of someone who knew they had done wrong and had decided warmth was the correct response to it. Devan had met men like Aldrich many times. They were not malicious, usually. They were simply people whose relationship with consequence had never been made concrete enough to require action. He did not dislike Aldrich. He found him, on balance, beside the point. Elan was at the meeting. She had arranged this. The letter confirming the meeting had included, at the bottom, in a postscript that managed to be both brief and non-negotiable. My daughter will be present. She has been managing the estate situation in my absence and has the most complete picture of the relevant details. Davin had read this postscript twice. He had read it once for its content and once for what it told him about how Elan had managed her father's return, which was apparently by making herself indispensable to the situation in a way that couldn't be cleanly extracted. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Aldrich said several things that were not useful, and Elan said several things that were, and the arrangement that emerged was this. The liquid assets and the timber rights would be sold, covering the 12,000. The remaining 5,600 would be structured as a 5-year obligation against the estate income, with Elan as the named manager of the repayment arrangement, because she was the one who knew the income situation. This last part was Davin's addition and not Croft's, and Croft had given him a specific look when he proposed it, which Davin received and did not adjust his position. Aldrich signed everything, which was the most useful thing he had done in the meeting. Ullin witnessed the signatures. Croft took the paperwork. Afterward, in the corridor outside the meeting room, when Aldrich had drifted toward the door with the relief of a man who has had a large thing resolved and doesn't need to remain in its vicinity, Elan turned to Davin. The named manager, she said. That's not standard in these arrangements. No, he agreed. You added it. Your father would agree to income-based repayment in a meeting and then manage the income in a way that made repayment difficult, he said. You know the estate's real numbers. Naming you as the manager is the only way the 5-year structure actually works. She absorbed this. It also gives me formal authority over the estate income. It does, he said. You're aware that's a significant thing to give the daughter of the man who owes you the money. He looked at her. It's a significant thing to give someone who has demonstrated she's the only person in this situation who manages information responsibly, he said. You've had the clearest picture of this estate for 3 years. Giving you formal authority over the repayment is the option most likely to result in the repayment. She studied him. You keep telling me the practical reason for things, she said. The reason that benefits you. Because the practical reason is true, he said. But it's not the whole reason. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. It's not the only reason. She looked at him steadily. The same frank assessment from the doorway, 3 months ago, on a Tuesday afternoon, when she had not flinched from his identity, or his purpose. The solicitors you recommended, she said. I met with them. I know. Marin wrote to me. She said I had done 3 months of work that should have taken a professional 6. I told you something similar in February. You did, she said. I thought about it afterward. I thought about why a creditor would take the time to tell the debtor's daughter what she'd done well. He didn't say anything, because she was working towards something, and he found, content to wait for it. I concluded, she said, that either you were managing me, setting me at ease so the meeting would be productive, or you were telling me something you thought I needed to know. A pause. I've had 3 months to collect more data on which one it was. And what's your current assessment? He said. She looked at him with eyes that were darker in the corridor's afternoon light, steady in the particular way they had always been. The named manager provision, she said. That wasn't management. That was, she searched for the word. Sensible, he offered. It was more than sensible, she said. It required you to trust my competence in a situation where trusting me costs you something, if I'm wrong. Yes, he said. You're trusting me. I'm trusting you, he agreed. She was quiet for a moment, a long moment, the kind that held something. "I want to tell you something," she said. He waited. "When I opened the door in February," she said, "and saw the Ashgrove crest on the carriage, I thought, this is the end of the estate. I'd been expecting it for 3 months, but seeing it was different from expecting it." She looked at the corridor wall, then back at him. "I stood there for a moment before I opened the door, and I told myself, present the information clearly. Don't make it a performance. Give him what he needs to make an accurate decision, and whatever he decides you can live with, because you'll have done what you could." "That's exactly what you did," he said. "I know," she said. "What I didn't expect was that the accurate decision would be what it was." He studied her. "What did you expect?" "Formal proceedings," she said. "The conventional path, which I had prepared for." A pause. "You didn't take the conventional path." "The conventional path didn't fit the situation," he said. "No," she agreed. "It didn't." They were standing in a corridor outside a meeting room in a house that was smaller than it had been 8 years ago, and the paperwork was signed, and the arrangement was set, and the 60 days were behind them, and there was no particular practical reason for either of them to remain in the conversation. Neither of them moved toward the door. "The repayment management," he said. "I'll need quarterly reports, financial statements, income against projection, any adjustments to the estate situation that affect the timeline." "That's standard," she said. "I can do that." "I know you can," he said. "I'm not concerned about the reports." She looked at him. "What are you concerned about?" He thought about the honest answer, which was that he was not concerned about anything specifically, and was instead thinking about the next 5 years of quarterly reports, and what they were going to look like, and about whether the named manager provision was entirely a practical decision, or whether he had been, in some way he hadn't fully examined, making sure he had a reason to maintain a connection to a situation that would otherwise close. "Nothing immediately," he said. She almost smiled. He had learned, over 3 months of correspondence, that she didn't smile easily, not because she lacked warmth, but because warmth, in her, expressed itself differently than performance. The almost was real. "The first report is due in April," she said. "I'll look forward to it," he said, and meant it in a way that exceeded the content of the words, which he thought she probably understood, given that she had been conducting accurate assessments of complex situations for 3 months, and showed no signs of stopping. He left. The carriage took him south on the long road back to the Ashgrove estate, and Croft organized the paperwork in the seat beside him, and the February landscape went past the window, and Davin sat and thought about a woman who had been handed an estate collapse, and a disappeared father, and 2 unhelpful solicitors, and had produced a financial document from it that was better than anything a professional firm had given him in years. He thought about quarterly reports and 5 years, and the particular quality of attention she had paid him from the doorway on a Tuesday afternoon, when she had stood her ground and let him in at the same time, which was a thing most people couldn't do, and which she had done without appearing to find it difficult. He thought about the named manager provision, and whether it was entirely sensible. He thought it was. He also thought it was something else. The 2 things were not, he found, in conflict. The first quarterly report arrived in April, and it was thorough. More thorough than required, not in a way that seemed performative, but in the way of someone who had been given formal authority over something for the first time and wanted to use it well, which produced a report that covered not just the income against projection, but a forward assessment of the next 2 quarters, and a note about a tenant situation in the East Farm that was likely to affect the autumn rents, and that she had already begun addressing. He read it twice. He wrote back with 3 questions and 1 observation, which was that the East Farm tenant situation she had flagged matched a pattern he had seen in 2 other estates in the region, and could be addressed with a specific approach that had worked there. Her reply came within a week, which was fast for correspondence between estates, and contained the information that she had already tried one version of the approach, and it had partially worked, and she had a modification she wanted to test. He wrote back with a question about the modification. She wrote back with the answer, and a follow-up question of her own. They were, by June, corresponding about things that had nothing to do with the debt repayment, which both of them had noticed, and neither of them had addressed, because the addressing would require one of them to name what the correspondence had become, and the correspondence was more interesting than naming it. In September, he went back to the Voss estate. Not announced. He was aware of the echo and found it, on balance, appropriate. He arrived on a Thursday afternoon, with no solicitor and no retainers, and knocked on the door. She opened it, looked at him. The dark eyes, the frank assessment, the composed face that gave nothing away, quickly. "The third quarter report isn't due until next month," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm not here for the report." She looked at him for a moment. "Then why are you here?" she said. He looked at her. At the door she had opened to him twice now, and the house behind her that she had been maintaining alone, and the 7 months of correspondence that had started about a debt and become something he looked for on his desk before anything else in the morning. "I wanted to see how the East Farm situation resolved," he said. She held his gaze. "You could have asked in a letter." "I could have," he agreed. A pause that held rather a lot. "The tenant accepted the modified arrangement," she said. "The autumn rents will be approximately what was projected." "Good," he said. Neither of them moved. "I've been thinking," she said, "about something you said in February." "What part?" "That you prefer accurate information to inaccurate information," she said, "and that a resolution you can stand behind is worth more than a fast one." She looked at him steadily. "I think that's true of other things as well." "Yes," he said, "it is." She stepped back and opened the door, and he came inside, and the house was warmer than February, and the maintained parlor had afternoon light coming through its windows, and the property law text was gone from the side table, replaced by something different, and neither of them needed to say what this was, because they both had too much respect for accurate information to call it anything before they knew what it was. What it was, over the following months, over more quarterly reports than the debt arrangement technically required, over correspondence about estate management that had become something else, over 2 more visits that were announced and therefore expected, and that she was not near the door for, but fully in the room. What it was real. The debt was repaid in 4 years rather than 5, because she managed the estate income with the same thoroughness she applied to everything, and because the North Timber rights had been undervalued even beyond Davin's February correction, and because the East Farm situation resolved better than projected. He told her, when the final payment cleared, that the debt was settled. She told him, with the almost smile that had become, over 4 years, simply a smile, "I know. I have the accounting." He thought that was, all things considered, the best possible answer. The accounting was accurate. It had always been accurate. Everything real between them had been built on the fact that she had walked him through bad numbers honestly on a Tuesday afternoon, and he had listened, and from that, from 2 people in a room telling each other the truth about a situation, everything else had followed. That was how it worked, when it worked properly. That was how it worked. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this story. If you liked it, feel free to check out our other videos or YouTube channels where you can find more interesting stories. Your feedback in the comments means a lot to us.